on from Raising the Frequency, straight from Israel. And I'm here again with David Icke from England. Hi, David. How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. You?
Yes. Well, yes, I'm good. I just see what happens in the world. And I'm like, the first thing I want to tell you is like, you can now start say, I told you so, because reality is really catching up with stuff you've been saying in the past 30 years and the stuff you put in your books and your presentations.
Yeah.
Definitely you can say, I told you so.
Yeah, but I wish I didn't have to. And also, I didn't do it to say I told you so. I did it to try to head off what I knew was coming. It's a real simple situation, really. My books have predicted the future on such a remarkable scale for a simple reason. There is an agenda for the world, and if it unfolds, in other words, nothing intervenes to stop it, it's going to happen. And so you have, for instance, people like Aldous Huxley in Brave New World and George Orwell, 1984, and other people that I've quoted in my books from times around 1969, who have predicted events with remarkable accuracy. And they could do it for the same reason that I could do it. If you uncover, or you working from the inside, like some of the people I've quoted, if you uncover the plan and nothing intervenes to stop the plan is going to happen, and therefore you can appear to predict the future. But what you're doing is predicting the plan. And that's what we're seeing.
Exactly. It's not a real prediction. It's just telling what the plan is.
Yeah, which becomes the future unless we do something to stop it. And of course, the greatest way of stopping it being stopped is to prevent people being aware that there is a plan. And so you present everything as the plan unfolds as in and of itself, as unconnected. That's why I call my videos dot connector, because it's in putting the dots together that you see the picture. The idea is to keep those dots apart in the public mind, and then they'll see things as random events instead of an obvious pattern. But increasingly, as you get closer to your goal, and we are moving very close to it now, it becomes more and more obvious to people that actually there is a sequence of events happening here. And like I say, if you can access that sequence of events before it becomes public, then you can appear to predict the future. This is the scale on which world events are not random, but are coldly calculated.
I don't think everything is planned, but definitely the more time progress, the globalists, they manage to make it tighter and tighter, and the plans do come true. Unfortunate for all of us, and we need to do something about it.
Well, this is the point. I hear people, even now, saying, do you believe in the conspiracy theory of history or in the cock-up theory? As if they're mutually exclusive.
In the what? What was the second one?
The cock-up theory, that things happen by mistake, by error. And the idea that you have to choose between one or the other is utterly ridiculous. Of course, people make mistakes and make bad decisions, and consequences come from them. But in terms of the society transforming events, they are not mistakes. And another thing about mistakes and what's called bureaucratic incompetence is that is often used as a way of screening away the fact that they are planned. What are they doing this for? It's crazy. It's just bureaucratic incompetence. Well, no, not always. Often it is bureaucratic calculation, because they want something to happen. It's something that's not good for humanity, and what in a rational response you would say you would never do because the outcome and the consequences are obvious, but you do it
Yeah.
anyway, and they say, oh, that was bureaucratic incompetence. But the outcome, and that's the thing to focus on, the outcome of the cock up is what you need to focus on. And does it advance the agenda to take us closer and
Yes.
closer to a centralized global Orwellian state? If the answer is yes, it's almost certainly not a mistake, but a calculated a step on the road to totalitarianism.
Also, some people, they ask me, so what? Everything is planned in advance. It doesn't make sense. So what? They don't, even the elite, the globalists, they don't argue between themselves. And of course they do. I mean, I think sometimes of, let's say, the Chinese royal family and the British royal family and whatever other royal families. Of course they have some conflicts. Of course they don't agree on everything. And all the think tank groups of the world that been funded by very rich families, they have some conflicts between them. But we shouldn't look at these conflicts because, again, like you said, the outcome, the result is the progress of their agenda. So with all the conflicts, they manage to work together in order to achieve this, try to achieve this global control. And we need to look at that because this is what should interest us.
Well, what you have is a symbolic, actually literal, pyramid of hierarchical power. And at the bottom of the pyramid are the masses of people who are kept in ignorance of what the top of the pyramid is doing and where it's taking the world. And at the peak of that pyramid are psychopaths on a scale that really doesn't do justice to the word psychopath. We need another one for them. And that level will bang heads together if it's necessary, if conflict lower down the pyramid is getting in the way of the desired outcome. So yes, you have, these people are psychopaths. I mean, you have super psychopaths at the top, but the main players in all this, down into politics, in the so-called deep state, they're all psychopaths according to any definition of the word. And so, and narcissists, and they're seeking their own agendas and their own things that they want to happen. But overall, while that inner conflict is going on, you've got the head banger together level of it, which makes sure it doesn't get in the way of the desired outcome. And another thing is that everyone in the hierarchy, even high up in the hierarchy, is expendable to the goal.
Yes.
To the God of the outcome, the great work of the ages. And therefore, they'll hang them out to dry if they get in the way. Great example is Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was serving the agenda, running a blackmail operation to control the decisions, shall we say, of the rich and famous. And he was tremendously protected by the hierarchy. This is why he got such a ridiculously lenient sentence the first time that he was arrested for paedophile activity. But when these women, these victims, these women today, wouldn't let it go and kept going and kept going and kept going, and we were heading for a court case that was going to reveal a lot that the cult, as I call it, doesn't want revealed, then they'll make sure that he's expendable to stop that coming out. And this is how it works. So yes, there's conflict between them, but not that it gets in the way. It won't be allowed.
Yeah. There's not so long ago in Israel, it was exposed that there is a network of kidnapping children from kindergarten and schools, mostly in the religious areas, which are very close and they don't speak about certain things. So they kidnap kids from kindergarten and primary school, just took them where the woman, the teacher or whatever, the in charge, she agreed to that. They kidnapped them. Some activities were pedophilic activities. Some were just like torturing and intimidating and creating like traumas for these kids. We're talking about hundreds of kids, hundreds of children, and this is not so long ago. Well, and this network is, just to say, the police doesn't want to investigate.
No. What you've just described is a pattern, a technique, a modus operandi that I've come across now for decades. Back in the 1990s, quite early in the 1990s, when I was traveling to America, talking to next to nobody wanted to know. But what I did do was spend months investigating and researching. And then I came back to Britain and I did the same here, and I've done the same all over the world, Australia, other places, on the subject of child abuse by the rich and famous, and a lot who aren't rich and famous, but particularly them, and its connection into Satanism and into mind control. And the pattern you've just described is the way it works all over the world. Again, I have this phrase, know the outcome and you'll see the journey. So if you don't know the outcome, events seem to be random. When you know the outcome, the stepping stones to that outcome can clearly be seen day after day. And the outcome that they want in terms of children is that which was described by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, which wasn't, to say the least, entirely coming from his imagination. And this was a world in which children are brought up by the state. In the end, throwing forward, there is no procreation. Actually, we have laboratory created people, which is what all connected into this AI smart agenda. And it's the reason that all this transgender explosion has gone on. It's moving towards the no gender human, which is the goal. And the idea is that not only won't parents bring up children, eventually parents will be no longer parents. There will be no need for procreation. And we're seeing the stepping stones towards that now. And one of them is to erode incessantly parental rights. All over the world, you're seeing parental rights being handed to the state, not least through schools that are becoming tyrannies, and to social services, which have long been tyrannies among those that are working towards this agenda. So you have this, and I've researched this in enormous detail. You have this gathering phenomenon around the world of children being taken by social services from loving parents for the most spurious, ridiculous reasons. And we've reached a point now in places like America and in places like Britain, and I'm sure in many other places too, where one of a parent's biggest fears is the knock on the door from social services, because they don't know where it's going to go. I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands of children every year taken from parents. This is the progression towards the no parent society and the state bringing up children from birth in nothing more than perception programming centers, which one name that Huxley gave to this whole thing was world hatcheries, where the state was producing children. So, and the other side of this is that, and you have to go deep into the esoteric for this, and this is why a lot of people look at me and say, "You're mad." No, I'm not mad. I'm just not on the.
No, you're not.
I'm just not on the postage stamp of perception that you are. Therefore, I appear to be extreme. I see you as extreme in terms of the limitation of your ability to perceive reality outside of the program. So it's not about perception. The point is that these paedophile rings and satanic rings are connected. And the paedophile rings are at their core to do with drawing off and manipulating the energy fields of the children. It's to do with other dimensional gods that feed off children's energy. It's like a nectar to them, prepubescent energy. What happens at puberty is we see it as a hormonal change, and on one level it is. But that hormonal change is generated by an energetic waveform field change in their energetic field. And these people want to absorb that energy before it transforms at puberty into an adult field. And this is something that goes way back. You know, when people talked about sacrificing children to the gods, or the word they use or the term they often use is sacrificing young virgins to the gods. That's just code for children. And I go in the books why they do that, why they go into this whole sacrifice stuff. Now, people will accept that this went on in historical times, that it went on openly for a time. What they don't realize is that when it became unacceptable publicly to do that, it went underground. And some of the most famous people in the world are practicing Satanists who are involved in this. And if people, oh, no. Well, you know, I mean, just open your mind a minute and do some research and you'll realize it's true. I won't tell you on the 10 o'clock news, of course, but do your own research, you'll find that it's true. And I've talked to people all over the world that have taken part in these rituals, that have seen what happens, that have been people who have been victims of these rituals, not to the point, obviously, of sacrifice, but have been abused in these rituals sexually. And this is what's going on. And so if you are wanting, and this is really going to lead into the point you've raised earlier, if you want the energy of children, then you need, quite obviously, to have access to children. And so these paedophile rings and satanic rings not only have infiltrated social services, so that social services, this is what's literally happening. Now, most social workers are decent people trying to do a decent job, but within them and within the hierarchy are people serving this agenda and this satanic agenda. And what they're actually literally doing is the paedophile ring will target a child, will identify a child, and then the social services will find a spurious reason to take that child from their family, and then it comes into the ring. This is happening. Not, you know, it's happening while people are watching the game show and some crap by Simon Cowell. This is what's happening in the world beyond the smokescreen. And so if you want to have access to children, then you target the areas, where children are, and most importantly, where you can have control of them. And this is why so many stories come out, nothing like the tip of the iceberg doesn't even cut it, but stories come out about paedophile rings infiltrating so-called care homes, children's homes, and all these other centers where children are there to be accessed. And so what the story you've told me about Israel there, these rings, this cult as I call it, has infiltrated social services, it's infiltrated the police, it's infiltrated the education system. Why wouldn't it? That's where most children are. And therefore, they work as one unit. So teachers who are part of this cult, and vast overwhelming majority are not, but those that are, will allow the children to leave school. I've talked to people that this has happened to so many times around the world, and will be allowed to go and be abused by these paedophile rings. And the police who have been infiltrated by this cult, they will make sure that this is not investigated, and this explains the the background to what you've just described. But you're talking about Israel. The same's happening in America. The same's happening in Britain,
Sure,
in
I know.
France, all over the world.
I know, I know. First of all, I'm on the same page here with you. Not extensively as you, but I've also researched these sort of things. I mean, one of the most famous examples is like Jamie Somerville from the UK. And decades of exploiting children and much more. I don't want even to describe it. But a couple of more things I want to throw in. First of all, following what you said in the past, that everything is upside down, it may be that the social services were actually established in order to reach children. This is just an idea, in order to be able to pinpoint children of their like. The second point, I just want to add it, that from what I understand, also part of these rituals are also taken from like experiments that were done by CIA, KGB, MI6, Mossad, what have you, the Chinese intelligence, etc., in causing traumas to people, but in that sense, it's to children, in order to create psychopaths in the future. I mean, this creating compartments in the brain, obviously we know we can then manipulate and control the person by a tick or by a word or by showing him the sound or the picture. And this is what they do also in this network in Israel, and probably also in other places, unfortunately, is to create future psychopaths for them to use then in various places. It can be Hollywood, it can be the UK entertainment system, the Israel entertainment system, etc. And this is how they work. They're looking in the future. Okay. It may be that, anyway, just to finish the sentence, they looking at the future and then basically creating their future comrades, the future psychopaths to use them.
Well, there's a lot to say about that. I mentioned earlier, if you remember, that pedophilia, Satanism, and mind control are connected. Again, I've done enormous amount of research on this, going back to the 1990s. The most famous or infamous of the mind control operations was MK Ultra in the United States, which actually became public eventually. At the time, I recall, of Gerald Ford, and Gerald Ford was involved in MK Ultra. He was one of the people that worked with the abuse of children in MK Ultra. And he appointed Nelson Rockefeller, the 4 times governor of New York, to have an inquiry into MK Ultra, which of course was designed not to find the truth. So they threw a few crumbs at the public, saying, "Oh, we've discovered this," but what they didn't, of course, reveal was the full scale of it. And you've indicated there something which is called trauma-based mind control. What they do, and this is often, well, they do it technologically now more and more through harmonics and stuff, but trauma-based mind control is how Manchurian candidates are created. What they do is they exploit a response of the mind to extremes of trauma. And that response is that the mind puts an amnesic barrier around the memory so that the conscious mind doesn't have to keep reliving it. It's a protection mechanism. And this creates, if you keep traumatizing children, and they want to start this process no later than the age of 6 to make it maximally effective. They create these, what they call these compartments in the mind control industry. They call them alters, as in altered states. And they create, in effect, a compartmentalized mind, like a honeycomb of compartments. These compartments, these alters, can then be hypnotically and psychologically programmed with certain personalities and behaviors. And they have one of these alters, which is known as the front alter. This is the personality which is most of the time that person's conscious mind. And anyone that knows them will think that is who they are, that personality. They will think that is their personality. But then
Mm-hmm.
what happens is through hypnotic keys and triggers and words, um, behaviors are programmed into these compartments known as back alters, and they stay in the subconscious mind until the trigger word, sound, sentence, whatever is given. And at that point, the front alter, which has not been programmed with any of this and knows nothing about it because it's a self-contained
Mm-hmm.
compartment, swaps with the programmed alter, which becomes the front alter briefly. And that front alter will then play out the programmed behavior. It might be having sex with a very famous person, something I've documented at great length in the books. And then,
Mm-hmm.
after the sex has happened and the child has been abused, the temporary front alter is put back in the subconscious, and the regular front alter is reinstated. This has not experienced the abuse, and therefore this knows nothing that's happened to this. And I'll tell you how amazingly these compartments work. I have spoken to people who've been put through this, who say that their worst fear was that they would have an operation in the hospital with one alter as the front alter, and then those alters switch during the operation, because this is the nature of consciousness and reality, way beyond what people realize.
Sure.
If that alter had switched in an operation, the alter that takes over has not been subject to the anesthetic, and so the person wakes
Wow.
up. No,
Wow.
so many have explained to me how they could be drunk or drugged in one compartment and then be switched to another compartment that was not the front alter at the time of the drink and the drug, and they
Wow.
are drug and alcohol free.
Free.
This is how mind can be manipulated, and this is what reality really is. They don't want you to know about it, but this is how it is. And so if you are going to create these alters, then what you do is you take little children and you make them experience their worst nightmares again and again. You abuse them sexually. You have them watch animals and other people be sacrificed. I am not freaking kidding.
Yes, yes, it's true.
And that means that these alters start getting formed in their mind, which they can then be exploited to do these various events, which, like going crazy with guns in schools, for instance, which can then be used as a problem to impose a solution, which is, oh, we've got to stop these people going crazy with guns, we've got to get rid of guns, and we've got to have more and more surveillance and control of the population. This is how it works. This is the real world outside of the illusion of Simon Cowell bloody celebrity programs that's actually going on.